Hello and welcome to the crux of Medtech. We go beyond the buzzwords, bringing you the insights from the innovators, investors, and leaders who are driving this life-saving space forward. Because I'm absolutely fascinated by the stories that people have to tell in Medtech. As someone who works in this sector on a daily basis, I come across so many interesting people and so many interesting stories that I think the world deserves to know about. Welcome to the crux of Medtech.
So welcome to the podcast, Esther.
Thank you very much, Henry.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So to start off with, it'd be great to just get an understanding of where did you start in the world of work?
I started in the world of market research, which is not the most exciting space. You don't choose to go into market research, you fall into it. Every single person I've met in that space have told me exactly the same thing. But and I was initially working with my clients were hotel groups. IHG, Hilton, and the likes, who were trying to understand their markets and who's staying in their hotels, whether leisure business, why, what they can do better. And that was really my first exposure to the role of insight, understanding your market. And as you know, all markets are changing constantly. And as a brand, you need to stay really close to that. And otherwise you lose your market shares and then you become has-been. It's finished for you super quickly. And then I did that. And then after that, I did an MBA in Oxford, really to transition into management consulting, how to use that insight, market insight, and turn that into strategies or help my clients turn that into strategy. So spent a brilliant year in Oxford doing an MBA with a young child with me. And that was almost my first exposure to investing as well. Not that I wanted at that stage to go into that space, but really understanding VC, private equity, different stages. Obviously had lots of classmates who were in that space. And then I joined after the MBA in a McKinsey spin-off company, which I joined the consumer brands side of the business. And then over years, I started specializing in consumer healthcare brands. So I advised Johnson & Johnson, GSK, Reckitt, and all those kind of big brands that we know in the UK and globally as well. But I also always kept like a diverse portfolio of brands. I worked with some whiskey brands and some financial services as well, and that's really interesting because it's stretching your thinking and your ability and understanding as well what's common across sectors and what you can borrow from one sector to the next. And I think we'll come to kind of innovation later, but when you see how the Fintech has disrupted this really traditional sector that banking is. And then now you have innovations who are trying to do the same with healthcare, which is even more traditional, right? It's definitely not there. And but I think it's that same idea that what can you borrow from other sectors? So I spent, 7-8 years in that company really. And that's part of my whole professional, this kind of the toolbox I built is really about helping companies and senior people make decisions. It's not about making decisions for them, but just like helping them work out, understand the challenges that they are facing. It's not always those that they think they are. And how do you solve them? How do you build strategies to address them? And how do you adapt strategies? And it's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And then progressively, you're saying, okay, so what next? What's next? I had the chance of having a break in my career, just moving country for family reasons, and spent 2 years in Denmark, where continued doing what I was doing, especially and more in healthcare. I worked with a couple of life sciences companies in that space in that time as well, and a Medtech company. But that's when I started having time to kind of space to think about next steps. And that's when there was COVID, and that's when I started angel investing. And understood that my whole experience, from consumer insight to strategy, and also collaborating with some private equity companies, was so relevant to early stage companies and healthcare in particular, because that's where my heart and passion was leading me to. And so that technologies were built either for the sake of the technology or because there was this kind of reason why a product was being built, or focus on the problem that to be solved, or patient outcome. But often there wasn't early enough thinking about how are you going to bring it to market? What's your value proposition for the different stakeholders? And there are so many stakeholders, as you know, in healthcare. And kind of I saw where I could bring something to the table, and that's what was the origin of the thesis, an investment thesis, alongside my two co-founders. And then that led us to launch THENA Capital. But it's really, and it sounds linear, but it's not linear at all. As you know, like any professional journey or life journey, it's you find the path, you understand the path afterwards, but when you're in it, it doesn't feel so linear at all.
100%. And so we will dive into THENA Capital and a little bit about the fund in a little while. But I wanted to go back to, you said one of your skill sets is about helping founders understand the challenges they face. It may not be the challenge they actually think they face. So tell me a little bit more about that. Like, how did you build that skill set? How did you identify that as something which founders really struggle with?
I think it's not just for founders, right? It was exactly the same with large corporates. I think as a company, you're so focused on the outcome, which is kind of the revenue or the market share, and when you're not hitting what you need to hit, or you're not unlocking the target that you're trying to unlock, you tend to focus on one reason or two. And often it comes back to the understanding of the market. And that's one thing that, a market landscaping, understanding where you're entering, you're doing some scoping is so essential, because then you can see all the dynamics in the market, what is influencing whom, which decisions are being influenced, what are the emotional buyers, what is their pain point. So we, all think, obviously the NHS is trying to save money, and that's a big thing. My innovation can save money in a way or another. But well, that's incredible. That's given it needs to do that, but doesn't mean that's how your value proposition needs to be when you are talking to the person who is making the decision on purchase, right? It's just you need to understand exactly how they think and what's their pain point even on that day, and how you can convince them. So it's often that it's just stepping back, so helping, the customers, founders, etc., to step back. What's the view of your market? How do you understand what's happening there? Tell me what's your challenge now? Why do you think? Have you thought of other reasons? And actually, maybe it's a bit more upstream. The problem is more upstream than that.
And that needs to come down to really spending time with the people who are actually going to be buying your products, because value proposition of doing something cheaper is very seldom actually the reason why someone will buy any innovation, whether it be medical or outside of medical. So spending time with the customer seems like a good way to start. And so moving a little bit further on to the angel investing, like what actually got you into angel investing? What was your kind of first investment that you wanted to put some money towards? What was it that drove that?
I think there's a moment where you want to be a bit more decisive and put to kind of, especially after advising companies for a long time. And yes, obviously you get paid on that project, but there's no other incentive, right? Whereas investing is you do an analysis, you make a decision, and potentially you advise as well the team, and then you get something out of it or not. Often. And I think it was that putting a little bit more into my decisions and to my actions. And I was lucky to be able to do it, even at a small, super small scale. That was it. It was just putting more into going all in a way.
Were you approached about it, or did you actively seek out an opportunity as the first one?
So, the way it started is I was introduced, and one of my co-founders, Pamela Walker, we were introduced to an angel group called Angel Academy, which whole purpose is to bring more female investors to the table. And it's an angel group where you have, it's actually a mixed group of angels that only back female founders and mixed teams, right? And it's an incredible group of angels. Everyone comes with a lot of experience in different domains and bring to the table, and we all work together on deals. So we first joined that, and we, one of the first deals was Bear Fertility we came across, which is, and ended up being our first investment. We invested twice in it. It's a medical device that it's a technology that was used in the clinical space, and pre-IVF. It still exists, still used, but IVF has a much higher value for that industry. So they do less of that kind of intrauterine insemination. So Bear Fertility was all about taking the technology and building a device, same technology, but that can be used at home. It's been launched in the UK. They've had, lots of babies being born as a result to that technology, and they've entered they're now in the US. And I think that was what we loved about it. This really fits with the whole democratization of healthcare, and kind of this really interesting. It's not a kind of category defining technology. It's not something that's, completely new, but it's clever. You take something that's proven to work in a context, so clinical in that case, and you're taking it in a different context. And you're also empowering a population, couples who are struggling with fertility. Not everyone can go to IVF, right? We all know how expensive it is, and it's a difficult journey as well. So if you can give another step, something else you can try on the way before getting there, then why not? So it's just like it was a different element, that kind of technology transfer at home, democratizing fertility, and that's how kind of love for devices started as well.
Amazing. And that's what I was going to ask you about next, actually, was you've clearly got a passion or purpose behind focusing on the medical or healthcare sector. Like what drove that? Was it just this investment was the first piece, or working with these healthcare companies? Like what was it that kept on driving you back towards this sector? Because you've worked in many sectors. Some of them are a lot more well paid than healthcare is. So what's kept you coming back?
It's interesting. I was telling a founder this morning, I was really lucky to work with a fund called Love Ventures for a year. They were investing in Fintech and PropTech, doing incredible work, the super team. But I didn't have, when I was talking about their thesis, etc., I knew that it's not the same thing than investing in Medtech for me. And that's when I understood that it's not the investing part for me that drives me. It's the investing in healthcare, because first I have a lot more knowledge about it. I feel like I have more expertise, but also because you feel like you participate to something bigger, other than obviously impacting society and how we do banking, how we do insurance, etc. Great. But I think it's closer to me. The healthcare part is so much, and also it's a need. Whatever happens, we always have. Our health is one of our kind of most precious assets, right? And there's so much to do out there. There's so many unmet needs, and it will continue. However much we innovate, there will always be and many. There will always be improvements.
Amazing. And that's where I think the conversation should come to THENA now. So like, what is the thesis of the fund? Why did you start it? How did it all come together?
So the thesis is really about backing innovation that transform the healthcare experiences and the patient experiences overall. And when we look at the kind of innovations that we deliver that, they can be either digital or devices, fast-track devices, though we don't go into novel devices that have a completely different risk-return profile, right? So it's a different portfolio we would be building, maybe one day. But for now, and I think we're at that moment where now all devices either are connected or will soon be, they should be all connected. So you have that integration between hardware and software now that's everywhere. And when we looked at investors, there were some kind of hardware-only investors, some health tech or digital-only investors. But I think there's this opportunity of mixing both. We see so many companies that might have had a component of hardware and dropped it and been digital only, or digital but are collaborating or partnering with some hardware companies. And I think those interactions and being able to be flexible around product format is really interesting. It's not just so much about the edge, but it allows to multiply the patient or the experience impact that you can have, as well as obviously build a portfolio that's a bit more balanced and diversified. Another key part of our thesis is we're a gender smart investment fund. And I think the UK has been leading in the measuring of the gender healthcare gap in healthcare, right? A few years ago, the big report was published. Everyone was stunned by the results. And since then, there's been some attempts to build a strategy to address that. And I think in our mind, it was, for us, as kind of a responsibility as investor. A lot is being said about the lack of diversity in investment, right? So we thought an opportunity to not only as a team encourage diversity in who we invest, how we invest, but also invest in innovations and innovators who understand the value of having diverse teams. You know, as you know, the Medtech space, you know, how many of those companies are male-only companies, right? And I think it's just because that's the industry has been built, that's how the companies have been built. I'm sure they will all say, yes, we know it would be better if we had a diverse team, etc. But now it's measured that companies with a diverse board, with a diverse senior team are performing better, right? But also if you go even further, the products you build, if you have a diverse team, the products you build serve the patient population better, because you understand that man and a woman has a different healthcare experience products differently, care for others in a different way, right? And the challenge is recovering from surgery for a man or for a woman is a completely different experience just because your life is different, right? And that's not always taken into account. So I think this is how, when we look at companies and when we look at teams to back, we look at their thinking. I mean, we discuss those points with them. We make sure that, especially when it comes to data-heavy companies, that or AI companies, that what does the data that they build on or they use to train their models, how diverse that data is, and just that, are they keen or not to work on closing the gender healthcare gap the way we are? So that's
amazing.
It.
Do you feel a similar sort of sentiment from the fellow investment community that building diverse leadership teams is a priority, or do you feel that maybe the financial side is still partly to blame for this?
What's interesting is all the data shows that you have stronger financial returns with diverse teams. But in those topics, even the most data-driven insights is not enough to make people change, right? I think we all have really ingrained biases, and changing mindset really takes time. So I think I see a lot of investors who are really working on how they invest, their processes, to make sure that they remove biases. Why is it? Because of what the work we are trying to do, and then we tend to gather, to be around people who do the same. I think data shows that there's still a lot of work to be done, both in terms of investment into female founders or mixed teams, is still kind of really lagging. Hence why the UK government has made kind of some big investments to change that, or to help turn the tendency a little bit, turn the trend. But
for sure. And have there been, so obviously there's companies who are looking for investment, they come to you and you have your thesis around this kind of diversity and diversification of a leadership team. Have you ever invested in a company or kind of got it wrong, where the founder portrayed one thing and then got in there and then actually this isn't as much of a priority as you would have hoped for?
It hasn't happened to date. It might, come up. It takes a certain kind of founder to look for investments in a fund that's led by 3 female GPs, right? So I think there's a filter happening in deals that come to us or founders through that. Honestly, I'm pretty sure about it. Just thinking about our portfolio to date, no. So whether from our macro fund and obviously our first few funds investment, it's too soon to say, but I don't believe it will. I trust.
Very good.
Yeah, and yeah, I think let's see. Once we can have that conversation again once in 10-year time when we've closed fund 1, and then I can tell you all any horror story. Absolutely. So how did their fund actually come together? So obviously you're involved with this, but then the 2 co-founders, where did you find those from? And when did you actually decide? What was the moment where you went, let's build a fund together? Yeah. So Dr. Pamela Walker, one of our co-founders, joined the same McKinsey spin-off company I joined after my MBA, within a few weeks of each other. She was heading the life sciences division, whereas I was in the consumer brand one. And we're not working together, more alongside each other. Maybe on a couple of projects we met, but we became friends. She did her EMBA in Oxford after I did my MBA. We had this whole French thing. She's not French, she's Canadian. Not French-Canadian, but we have this whole French thing going on as well. Families around the same age. So I think, and then, so as you do with friends, you do a lot together. You think about, you stretch each other, you push each other to do things differently. She was working with life sciences companies, so lots of pharma companies, but also private equity, doing due diligence, M&A advisory. And I think, so we decided to Angel Invest together. We went on that. We decided to do due diligence together, to put our checks together, do as a team, right? And that was, we didn't know, but we were testing our ability to make decisions together, right? To make the investment decisions together. And our third partner, who's so Tatum Getty, who's a family friend of Pamela, they connected during COVID, etc. I was in Denmark. And same, she was going through a transition period, in her career. She's coming from the startup world in the US, in the health and fitness. And we all come to this with a different personal reason to build THENA, but we came around the vision and the mission. And I think Tatum started Angel Investing with us as well, going to it, looking at what it is and how we work together. And then, as you do, you talk about this with your network, with people and then we started having other investors, fund investors, and more institutional investors that we knew who were saying, that's interesting. that's a different perspective. You look at it differently. We don't have enough. There are not enough investors. Why do you look at Medtech? No one is investing in Medtech. Everyone's been burned in Medtech. Where do you see it? Oh, I've never seen that. I don't see what you're saying, but that's interesting. That makes sense. I can see how this bit of experience you have is bringing something different to the table. And we started having people saying, why don't you do that at bigger scale, bigger checks? Why don't you raise SPVs, etc.? And all three of us at the same time were kind of a time in our career where it's nice as an angel hobby thing, but if we want to start do larger checks, and how do you do that, right? And then that's how the idea of building a fund came together. And I'm glad we didn't know it would be so hard at the beginning.
And so you decide to start a fund, and that's absolutely great to start that, but then comes actually, where are we going to find the capital from? So how did you then go about actually raising the fund, and talk me through that experience?
Yeah, it's true that between the moment you kind of become and set up your LLP and you show up on Company House, and the moment where you actually, raise the fund entity, there's quite some time, right? I think we were incredibly lucky from the beginning. We came across the British Business Bank really early on. And we always had kind of, if you look at other VC funds and their first funds, a lot of people invest through SPVs, right? Gather other small checks around them for a specific deals. And you have people who raise kind of a 3 million fund first, and then 5 and a 10, etc. And then you have others who go straight for a larger fund, which is the route we chose, so to raise a 50 million pound fund. And obviously, as for everything, you hear people say, no, you should do differently. You should do a different reason. And why we decided to go for 50 million is we said, if we know we're being told that there is an opportunity, we're onto something. There's an opportunity. We need to make larger checks. If you want to get the most of an opportunity, you need to go and do it properly, right? It was the moment to do it. But obviously, from 0 to 50 million is tough, right? We needed to find an anchor investor, and we decided to, hence why the BBB. And we met them early, right at the beginning, knowing, because we had done our research, knowing that we were ticking every single one of their boxes of their ECF program, the emerging manager program. And it's an institutional investor, right? They take time. They get to know the thesis, the team. They look at our investment, how we invest, how is the team going to break or not break, because a lot of investment teams break up, right? So that took a certain amount of time, and then but we were patient, responsive, and we learned a lot as well from that process. And I think it helped us pitch in a much better way to other LPs, be more convincing, having answers to every single one of their questions. And then as we were going through that kind of 18 months, 2 years process with the BBB, we were meeting a lot of other investors. We were sharing our thesis and all said, yeah, let's wait until the BBB comes. Let's wait. And then once the BBB committed, and then we started going around the same people, and then more, and then expanded. And as you do it, you start understanding who your core investors is. Who it's just like with a company, like you have a message. Who is your message resonating with, right? What's your core target? And then we get that people who understand the value of diversity investment, the people who agree with our gender smart investment strategy, people who see value in Medtech and how we invest in Medtech. And in the end, what it comes down to, we are a young team. We have some track record, especially a professional track record. So what our backing is the team, just like when you invest in pre-seed or seed stage, right? We invest at seed stage, you mostly back the team, right? So, yeah.
Awesome. I'm interrupting this episode to bring you a word from our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical technology development with deep scientific and engineering expertise. They support ambitious medtech companies in solving high-risk, high-complexity challenges where there's no margin for error. Whether you're tackling uncharted technical territory or racing to bring a product to market, TTP provide clarity and direction. By de-risking innovation and ensuring seamless alignment with regulatory and manufacturing demands, TTP help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes. Who was the first investment that you made? What was the first check?
So our first investment is in a company called Plexa. So that's our fund investment. That's your question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, fund investment is Plexa. Is actually we had invested in Plexa with our macro fund before. And that's actually the only angel micro fund investment that's coming into the fund. And I mean, we've known that founder and that team for, a year and a half before we made a fund investment, right? That's so privileged to be able to do that, to know inside out the team, seeing them build, go through challenges, etc., which makes the investment, the decision easier, right? But what Plexa is doing is it's been founded by a founder called Dr. Sahir Mehta, and who's on the back of his research just built a device that is preconditioning the skin before surgery. So he's a surgeon, breast reconstruction surgeon. So the first version of the device is for breast reconstruction. So when you again, the idea was known that when you warm the skin, you bring blood to the surface of the skin, and then the skin is more likely to heal better and less likely to have infection. So in breast reconstruction, the tissues are really thin, and the rate of infection is quite high. A lot of women have to go back. Not only they've had cancer, but they have to go back and have another surgery because there's been an issue with their first breast reconstruction. So, and if you think about the whole process of surgery, especially when, it's after cancer, is as a patient, there's your, life is in the hand of a surgeon. There's nothing you can do to prepare for that. And you kind of don't know what's going to happen. So just with that device is not only delivering improved healing or improved outcomes of healing, but it's also giving something to the patient they can do to prepare to the surgery, for the surgery, right? And it's just this empowerment that is really key when you've been through a tricky health a journey, and where you've just been doing what you've been told to do, and there's not much that you can drive yourself. This is something that you can drive and design. And they've built. We're talking about hardware, software integration earlier. They've built a companion app to help women, even those who don't use the device, but to understand the journey, their breast cancer journey, and what they can do to support themselves, and up to the point of kind of breast reconstruction surgery.
Incredible stuff. And I mean, it's one of the most kind of scary times is going through that. One of our colleagues, Liz, she's a survivor of breast cancer, and like hearing her talk about the experience, it's going to a hospital fills her with just absolute dread at the moment. And so, yeah, it's something I've never had to go through, but hearing her story is just, it sounds horrible. So.
And I think that's something that was key to us sees it early on, and is you have a lot of treatments, even kind of on the drug side. They're really thinking, companies are really thinking about how can I make sure that the patients who use my therapy, who use my device, go through that journey. How can we do more for them than that? It's obviously for commercial reasons, but it's just to make sure that your drug is taken in the right way. Patients continue do exactly, and you have some feedback potentially about it. And that whole kind of being closer to the patient. It's a whole trend that's been going on for kind of 10, 15 years now. But at the moment, there's an opportunity of using new innovation to do that, right? And definitely pharma has been looking into that. And that's what that explains some of their acquisition strategies as well, is to really deliver more, do more for the patient. Yeah.
So do you feel that all these digital tools and AI should be used so that caregivers can give more care? Is that kind of the thesis?
I think it's helping to deliver care. Definitely, some of them, not all of them are. It's not the objective of all of them, but I think empowering the patient, empowering caregivers, I think there's a lot in that. And there's even data showing that the patient outcomes increase when there's lower anxiety, when there's more, and you have lower anxiety when there's more empowerment, right? And being able to understand what's happening to you and understand why you're told to go through that journey, take those drugs or do certain things, change your diet, exercise in that way, not that way. All those elements we used to control everything. We used to control why we buy, what we buy, how we buy it, how we, where we work. We make so many decisions. And in health, I think there's a lot that is taken away or that we are not able to understand, right? Or we have to trust a lot more people to make our choices.
Understood. And this kind of brings us back to one of the topics that you mentioned in the very first explaining of going through your career, and it's that healthcare is so far behind in terms of innovation. And so I want to bring it round to that topic really. So how far behind do you think we are in the world of healthcare? Like, give me a bit of an idea about.
I don't want to say, I don't think healthcare is far behind in innovation, because that's not true. Every single, all the drugs, all the, the tools that are being used are the result of innovation, right? I think there's always more, especially when it comes to digital transformation, that can be done, and how data could be used. And I think now it's a hot topic, obviously, with AI. It's that digitalization is so powerful. So a few countries, small countries, right, that helps, that have completely digitalized their healthcare system, unified system. And with the tools that we have now, with AI, unless it's a completely digitalized system, you can't deliver prevention. And we know the potential of embedding prevention into a population, right? Link that to education, etc. But for bigger, older and traditional systems like the NHS, this is such a massive job to deliver, right? I think that's where I say it's not that there's a lack of innovation, but it's not enough adoption and no real opportunity to completely rethink how things are done. Because in the end, it's about life and death of so many people, and any change you make has a risk, a life and death risk, right? I was comparing to banking. It's a highly regulated industry as well that's been slow, and but in the end, it's not life and death. And it's highly commercial, which I think helped with the transformation. Healthcare a lot of it is public health, right? And this is where most of the data comes from. And most people, especially in the UK, is public health. So it's asking a lot. Already, a lot is being asked to the NHS, and this is another challenge that they have to address.
It is. And I know that as the UK government has set out a big spend on digitalisation and AI within the NHS. Do you think throwing a load of money at the problem is the right thing, or how do we change kind of the systemic problem that I guess exists more?
If I had the answer to that. Listen, I think there's, I don't think they're just, some putting a lot of money behind it. I think every day we work and collaborate with people who are in the NHS, who are pushing digital innovation and digital adoption. People are, and that's what I find incredible with this institution, is people who are in it are so passionate about it. So many people just want it to survive, to get better, and to help more people. And that's why a lot of we see so many clinicians who go become innovators because they see an opportunity they want to try and solve. So, and if you look at it in a way, the NHS has been an incredible platform to test innovation, right? So they are trying. There's this, intention. The intention is there. They are testing through the pilots. They are testing those innovations. The adoption and scaling is difficult, but I think we'll get there. I'm an optimist anyway. I'm an optimist. But I think because of that kind of faith of so many people who are working hard internally to make that possible, not afraid to change. I think it's often a lot of heads around a single decision and a lot of objectives that maybe contradict each other. A little bit makes it harder. But I'm optimistic because of all the energy I see. Especially in the innovator world, and people who, there are a lot of NHS people, nice people. So when I say nice, it's NIC, who are getting and collaborating with innovators. So it means they want to crack it. They want to find a way to ensure more innovations achieve the market and get used by patients. And that's, for example, one of the objectives of the London Institute of Healthcare Engineering, is really to bring people from academia, NHS, NICE, to really find ways of and investors as well, to make sure that the right innovations get back to more innovations get in the hand of patients.
But bringing it round to conversations with innovators, you spend a lot of time with people who are innovating in this space and a lot of time with founders. How many, on a weekly basis, how many people do you speak? How many pitch decks do you see, for example?
So it's not just me going through it, but at THENA, I think we have around, I would say 50 decks a week that we look at, that are on thesis, and then that we sift through. Obviously, we have systems in place to make sure that we don't actually go through every 50 pitch decks. We look at most of those, but some are easy to, dismiss: stage, geography, the space as well.
So then the question comes to, what do the ones that get through, what do they do to stand out? How do they get seen by your fund? So apart from things we've already discussed, what makes the best, I guess, how do you know, or how do you get that feeling you want to speak to them? And then when you meet them, how do you get the feeling that, yeah, we want to take this further than just this first call?
Easy things is we have set criteria, right? So we invested seed into UK companies. Then when we look at companies that fit that, it's seed, what have they, and there are digital platforms with clinically validated or in the process of being clinically validated. So no wellness apps or wellness products or devices. And so if they meet that, first, does the problem real? Does it look real? The problem that's being solved? Does the solution seem to make sense? And how big is that problem that's being solved, right? And what comes out of that is, does it fit a VC model? A lot of companies can't be backed by a VC investor, shouldn't be, don't need to be backed by a VC investor. You need to be a company that has a potential to reach a certain scale, certain market size, to to be worth an investment from a VC fund, right? Because again, we have a large fund and we need to return money to our investors. And I think that's an element that a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand, right? Is what is a VC model? And if that doesn't fit, there are lots of other investors you can go to, or grow organically. So I think that's the next thing, Problems, I agree with the problem. It's big enough. The solution makes sense. And finally, I can see some logic in the initial go-to-market strategy, what they're planning. It doesn't have to be right, but it makes sense. And it shows that some research has been done, there's an understanding. And then obviously, the team, there's a strong fit between the team, the problem they're solving, and how they're solving it, right? That's more or less kind of what, at a deck level, what we look at. What might be a reason why a company that meets all those, but is put aside at that stage, why we would do that is, for example, I've actually seen 10 decks addressing the same problem, similar-ish solution, and there's nothing standing out. It looks good, but there's nothing standing out. So that could be a reason. Or actually, we've looked in detail at that vertical or at that space before, and we don't have conviction a company, a technology, or that similar innovation can unlock the potential of that space. And then it's first founder call. And then that's, make sure that what we understood from the deck is right, getting more granularity about it. And you start getting a sense of how people think. And obviously the chemistry, how they are, how do they talk about it. It's not about the personality, but what comes out of it. I think there are some funds have a really clear profile of founder that they want. Whether they second-time founder, exited founder, or they have that kind of attitude. They have a certain attitude. We don't have that. I think you can have some first-time founders who are incredible. If you're a second-time founder, it's because you've done it once and might have, exited already. So, and there's the hero founder, who's super controlling, high energy, super kind of always out there. That can be great, but you can be an incredible founder even with a different type of personality, right? But it's all about we collaborate, we work with the founders, so we need to have that fit as well in terms of personality. And I mentioned the diversity element. They don't have to be a diverse team yet, but if they're not, and we ask what's their thoughts on it, there needs to be a fit in how we see things. Some people need to work with people who are like them, come from the same, same education, etc., because that's what they need as a team. And I think that's fair. That's not what we like to back, but it doesn't mean that the company can't find funds. But I don't think that would work with us. But so I think you just carve out the profile that you like. But that's the initial steps.
And one thing I really love about THENA is there's two things. It's the community in the podcast. We talked about Medtech being a bit slower than other industries. And I mean, if we just take the tech industry as an example and what some of the VCs are doing in tech and building media presence, building communities, like that's exactly what will give distribution for the founders, exactly what will get more LPs coming to the fund. So I love that you guys are doing that. But what's the main reasons you guys have set up communities, podcasts, and what kind of made you think that, we need to be doing this kind of thing?
I think the community has been, initiated by one of my co-founders, Tatum, and the main reason she keeps repeating that is when she comes from the health and wellness space, the US, and she was like, okay, I need to understand more about the UK healthcare, and I need to understand about that kind of technology. I need people. I need people to help me do that. If we have an answer to that, if we don't have an answer to a question in the team, I need to get to other people to find the answer really quickly. As a result, I need a community around us. And she went and she built a community, and we built it together. So that was the first thing, is filling gaps. I'm not scared to say that we have gaps, and we'll keep on having gaps, but we're really good at filling those gaps. And the community is a brilliant way to do that. And when people, Tatum was explaining that on my podcast the other day. I think there are benefits to a community that you don't anticipate. The other day we learned that as a result of some of our first few events, founders have found investors, founders have found advisors, people have started collaborating, industry people have started collaborating together. You catch up with people, you this sense of belonging. Everyone, the market is changing. Everyone is, addressing challenges all the time. If you can come within a community and share or finances, that's highly valuable. And people associate that feeling with THENA, kind of that trust and that expertise with THENA. And I think that was a beautiful way of building our brand. It's maybe strange to say, you talk about brand in the kind of the VC industry, especially for a new fund, but that's where we come from, and that's our team is THENA, and we want people to understand what THENA is, and building a brand is exactly that. It's communicating who we are. And the community is a brilliant way of communicating really the essence and the values of THENA Capital.
Absolutely.
And you were asking about the podcast.
Yeah, please.
I think in a way, and I started doing the podcast when I was working with Love Ventures, and it was just, being new in VC, let's talk to people who have been in VC, who are part of VC, and you think VC is only investors, but actually you have investors. And then you have the advisors, and you have venture partners, and you have the innovators, and you have industry, and then you suddenly experience the diversity of people and skill set who are gravitating around VC. And that's almost what I started trying to portray with my podcast. And it's often driven by people we meet. That's, we've met each other at a conference, and that's how it happens. And you're like, okay, let's continue the discussion. And people enjoy. And I love listening to people. I'm not used to talking that much.
I know. I appeared on a podcast quite recently, and sitting the other side of the table feels very uncomfortable. I haven't listened to the full thing yet, but anyway, but thank you very much for joining me today, Esther. Is there anything you want to leave the audience knowing about yourself or THENA?
Thank you very much, Henry. I think I've talked a lot about myself and THENA. I've said a lot already, but I think to build further on your point about community, I'd really welcome anyone who thinks that what they do can have an impact in what we do, whatever their perspective is, whether they come from the NHS, industry, pharma, whether they're an innovator at a later stage or at an earlier stage, and think that they can bring something to the table or benefit from the community. Please do reach out.
Amazing. Thank you for
joining
me.
You'll be welcome.
Thank you for joining me.
Bring something to the table or benefit from the community. Please do reach out.
Amazing. Thank you for
You'll
joining
be welcome.
me. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Crux of Medtech podcast. If you're not already doing so, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Crux. Crux is a medtech search firm which places pioneers in transformative roles to help us live longer, healthier lives. We do 3 things for companies. We help hire world-class executive talent.
We help companies raise investment from Series A to Series C and execute upon M&A. And we also are building a community of medtech leaders to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and accelerate the companies to help them go faster. If you're interested in any of those three things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow the link in the show notes to find out more. Thank you.